All right, so AI stocks are going absolutely nuts right now. And I've honestly never seen anything like it. I think this is the most generational opportunity that will be given to us in our lifetimes. I mean, someone even in my server just started with 50K and within 1 month is up over $1 million. And this is just following my calls that I made on AMD, Micron, Intel, and SanDisk, four of the biggest AI and semiconductor stocks in the market. In my previous video, I discussed how it's really never been easier to make generational wealth by going all in on AI. And in this video, I talked about the biggest private investment I've ever made into what I call the next Anthropic, which is basically Prometheus, Jeff Bezos' new AI company. And I also discussed public market plays that have all gone absolutely crazy. I discussed Intel, I discussed SanDisk, AMD, and of course, Micron. And all of these coins, or not coins, stocks have been going absolutely crazy. I mean, AMD is up, to $415 after earnings yesterday, from around $300 where I first entered. Intel, the same thing. I mean, after this all-time high break at 75, it's all the way up to 111 today. Micron especially has gone all the way up. I entered after this all-time high break at 476, and it's literally at 660. It's up, almost 80% over the past couple weeks. And same with SanDisk. I mean, obviously SanDisk has been going absolutely crazy. I mean, this is up, absurd amounts since the past year. And even just since the last video I made at $1,000, I discussed a clean setup on that breakout above, and it's been up 50% since then. So this is by far the most, profitable generational opportunity that I've ever seen. And the capex for AI is only going to continue to grow. And these are obvious setups from the start. I mean, you didn't even really need to know much about AI or anything about the narrative to understand how to sort of scale into these AI setups, right? I think the entire point of my video was discussing how my trading system, right, is involving high conviction asymmetric trades primarily in crypto, but also within equities as well. And these apply for any kind of market, right? These principles involving market structure, involving high time frames, SR levels, like all-time high breaks, right, involving narratives, relative strength, and momentum, these all applied for these trades that I took on SanDisk, on MU, like INTC. For example, right, with SanDisk, this has been making all-time highs for a long time. And with this all-time high break right here, right above this sort of cluster of highs, this was a pretty significant momentum shift. And this allowed me to sort of position again into SanDisk as well. And same with MU, right? This was even more obvious of a setup where we see this all-time high break for this level that has not been breached for many months. And so when we see this momentum shift alongside the sort of narrative with semiconductors and AI, we get this huge move to the upside. And same with Intel, right? This was even more obvious in some senses because the Trump family's behind this, right? Trump was shilling this as well, and this all-time high break above $76 was a very clear signal to go all in. And not only that, but really, we also had a really clean entry above here, above $87 that I mentioned in my previous video. And ever since then, we've been up, significant amounts. So same case with AMD, right? We got this clean all-time high break. This has been an all-time high level since last year, right? All the way back in October. So now we make a clean break above these highs. We have very clear invalidation below this level right here. And so any loss of momentum or any sort of deviation back into this range allows us to cut the trade. But instead, we got this huge move to the upside. And that's how, we have moves like this where people are able to make over $1 million in 1 month. Someone asked him the sort of strategy involved, and he mentioned that he bought calls with expiration date within 1 to 2 weeks of purchase. So this is something I discussed in my server where I basically talk about how if you're buying all-time high breaks within stocks, you want to be careful about options, right? I think for the most part, if you are new to trading stocks like this, you should probably just buy outright underlying shares rather than options. But in some cases, you can buy options and that's justified because at the end of the day, right, if you are unfamiliar with options, basically an option is a way for you to buy 100 shares of a certain stock at an underlying price. So this strike price allows you to dictate how far in the money or out of money that you want to be on this particular opportunity. And the value of a stock is really tied to two different things. It's tied to implied volatility and it's tied to time to expiry. So the more time that an option has to expire, the more valuable it becomes. But of course, if you buy options that are very close to expiring, then the volatility is going to be absolutely insane. And there's more risk associated with this because there's less time for the stock to actually reach that price. And of course, you can also get IV crushed, which basically means that if you are buying a stock that is moving heavily because of earnings or maybe because of a breakout, then if the volatility goes down, then the value of the option goes down. Of course, if you buy options that are very close to expiring and they continue to break out, right? If we get these all-time high breakouts that that have continuation like this, where even after the initial breakout they continue, then these options are going to be heavily into the money very quickly, and then you will also get a spike in volatility that will add to the premium in the option. So that's how we get compounding gains. Like you can actually get 100 to 400% gains per day on stock movements of like 8 to 10%. And this has been happening virtually every single day. We're on something like AMD. We've gotten moves that have been, within 5 to 10% virtually every single day. Same with SanDisk, right? So these options are up, 2,000, 3,000% within a couple weeks. And this is how we get moves like this, where someone is able to turn 50 grand into over $1 million, right? Within 1 month because of this sort of strategy with options. And I think ultimately you don't even need to do this. I think as long as you're able to profit on an asymmetric move, then I think that's fine. And you don't even need to play with options, right? If you had just bought shares, you would be up like 50% in like a week or two, and that's already really good. So that's sort of what I want to discuss in terms of strategy, in terms of scaling into these opportunities, especially on all-time high breaks. Really, the dirty little secret that trading institutions don't want you to know about is that buying all-time high breakouts for assets that are trending have been the most profitable setups of all time, right? This allowed me to catch, for example, silver from like $50 to $120. Same with gold from like $3,500 to like $5,100. And same with so many other assets over the past year where I publicly made a lot of videos on them. For example, like with XMR, I made a video about that early this year, and that went from like $480 to like $800 in 1 day. And these are the kinds of setups that you want to look for where there's defined invalidation, right? The invalidation is very close, and the possibility of upside is very, very high. And most people, like how to expose, someone who's a noob is that they think that these setups are chasing, right? They think that if you're buying something at all-time highs that you're too late and that you're actually a shitty trader for doing this. But in reality, right, these are the most asymmetric setups, because even if, for example, if you buy the top, so what, right? You lose maybe a couple percent, but you could gain, 60, 100% if you win, right? So in reality, these are the best possible setups you can take on assets in price discovery. One of the setups that I discussed last week, being ARM, actually seems to be having a pretty actionable setup above this resistance level that has formed over the past couple weeks above 237. So this was something that I initially longed off the all-time high break, and this is a very pivotal all-time high that's been developing over the past couple years. So multi-year all-time high break, holding above the all-time high, looking to make another high. Looks like a sort of Intel-like setup actually right here, very similar to the one that we discussed last week above this level right here. So the same could be potentially forming on ARM if we actually cleanly establish market structure and have a reclaim above this level right here. So definitely watching for that for yet another setup on this stock as well. I think that we'll continue to see opportunities like this. I mean, there's so many other stocks that have pulled off similar moves. Even Google, for example, pulling this move off after the all-time high after earnings. I see some pretty similar setups brewing on some semiconductor stocks like TSM, for example. Similar sort of all-time high breakout potential right here. And same with SMH as well, which is another semiconductor ETF actually, which is also having another all-time high break as well. And one other category to keep an eye on is AI sort of a data center infrastructure build out. So companies like Sterling Infrastructure, they just had earnings that were insane a couple days ago. So this is up a lot, but generally has been a very clean sort of all-time high breakout play where this was the sort of move after earnings, and then we had a breakout above and then another similar move above right there. And other stocks that are in a similar category are like Fix, for example, another sort of all-time high breakout play like this. And also LGN and ECG are very similar looking charts. Same all-time high breakout setup applies to them as well. Another company that stands to gain a lot from this narrative as well is Dell. And they have a similar all-time high breakout setup as well, with this actually reclaiming this $180 level and looking pretty good in the price action in between, and it's up like 10% today. So this is another one to keep an eye on for a potential intraday setup with these lows today being used as invalidation. Some opportunities like Samsung in the Korean markets, same thing, right? This made an all-time high back in earlier this year, or actually last year, and then it was very clean up above, and then we saw this reclaim, and then we saw this big move up about 2x, and then same thing right here, right? We had an all-time high above 220,000, and then we got this big move up just yesterday. So These all-time high breakouts are what you really want to play using a system where you have asymmetric sort of setups, right? Where you have very clear validations that are much lower than your upside, which is much higher by comparison. So that's what I'm looking to play at in terms of continuing to ride these AI stocks. Of course, I definitely took profits into these moves. I think it's advisable with how much these are up. But obviously, right, with stocks like MU, they are only able to support 50% to 2/3 of customer demand. The demand for AI, and semiconductors is absurd right now. And one of the reasons why I also scaled into Micron was because they were trading at anywhere from like 6 to 9x forward earnings. And this is something that was pointed out in my server a while back from someone that has been a long time member, Lance, and he was talking about MU at all-time highs. And he was saying that forward PE is somewhere in the 8 to 12x range. And if you guys don't know, that's pretty low. So usually forward PE for a lot of these AI stocks, for AMD, for example, it's literally in the like 40 to 60x range, right? This tweet says that AMD is trading near 60x. And Micron actually generates 5 times more profit. So with this, actually, this enabled me to sort of double down my thesis as well, and enabled me to really sort of scale into this opportunity even more based on that, as well as the chart structure, right? Ultimately, I didn't really need any of this information. The chart just spoke it all, but this provides extra confluence. And similar with, Goldman is just saying that the AI build out is happening, and they just ascribed a $7.6 trillion number from 2026 to 2031. So in this 5-year period, this is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And they're saying that the AI capex is growing rapidly. So really, I think the opportunity with AI and with these stocks is only really continuing to grow. And obviously, there's going to be pullbacks. This is not going to go up in simply a straight line. But these are really based on earnings, right? They're based on real revenue that's being generated. And this is something I discussed in my last video where the PE ratios for many of the dot-com bubble companies were in the hundreds, and the revenue, was not really there. And, internet companies are still very speculative, but AI, it's not really in the same boat, right? The speculation there's still a speculative premium, but really the revenue and the year-over-year growth is continuing to be there, and it's tangible. So that's sort of my thoughts on the market. Of course, everything is up big, so would definitely advise being able to have good risk management as these moves continue to play out. But as the structure sort of develops, right, I think if you're not exposed, you kind of just need to get exposed at some point, right? Really, if you're riding a bullish market structure like this, then you can set your invalidations at certain intraday lows, for example. So if you had just entered Intel yesterday, for example, your intraday lows would be right here. Or if you entered today, then your intraday lows would probably be right here, right? And you just kind of play this structure with invalidation at those lows until it no longer holds. And I think that's one way to get exposed to these opportunities if you're not already exposed. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have for this video. Really appreciate all of the support on the recent videos. Things have been going crazy. I mean, people are making a fuck ton in the server, and I've been reached out by many people in the past week. Just it's been crazy with these AI gains, and I just want to help as many people as possible make these opportunities accessible, not only in the public markets, but also the private markets. I mean, we're helping with a lot of deal flow for people who are trying to get access to opportunities like an Anthropic right here, someone that's investing in their primaries, and there's an opportunity to invest with us. And similar to a lot of other kinds of companies like Stripe, someone just shared this opportunity with all of these top private market companies in AI, in robotics. So would love to see more of you guys in here who are interested in these kind of private market deal flow, and I'm trying to basically distribute as much of this as possible. So if you're interested in that, as well as in public market sort of updates, I give updates every single day on my positioning in this server. So feel free to join in the bio as always. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video.